around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, well I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky and watch those aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a leader jet line and take a dive to show all of these people what it means to be alive.
My name is Timothy, and I am an addict. I don't know how you all do it in the Dopey Zoom meeting here, but yeah, I have a sobriety date of March 12th, 2012. I'm not sure if everyone works a 12-step program here, but I do, and I have a sponsor. And I sponsor probably too many guys right now, but man, recovery has given me a life that I could not ever imagine. And I don't, they say you sponsor people for your own sobriety, but like now it's just beyond that. I want other people to be able to escape that kind of hell, that I was living in my disease. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, born and raised here. I grew up personally in an alcoholic home. The first time that I ever drank alcohol, I was like 4 years old. My parents were alcoholics. They would have these like huge keg parties every night. And they were young when they had me. And I've heard a lot of speakers say, well, my parents, they did the best with what they had. But I heard another speaker say they did the best with what they had, but a lot of it was punishable in a court of law. And so I relate to both of those things. It's like, yeah, they tried, but it was a fucked up upbringing. I still love my parents, though. I'll say that. But yeah, so I remember having my first drinks around 4 or 5, and I remember getting really drunk, and I remembered liking it. I also used meth for the first time when I was like 4 or 5, which sounds fucking crazy. But my parents had this tweaker babysitting me, and he left his meth out, and I ate a bunch of it. And my parents basically were running experiments on me after that happened. Like I was marching around the living room militantly with this certain book that I wouldn't get rid of. And I was like marching in a path the whole time. And it's crazy. And I'm like, I'm a dad now. And I'm like, dude, we would rush my child to the hospital. Like there would be no tweakers ever babysitting my child. Like there's just some things you just don't do, but like I said, that's how I grew up. That kind of stuff seemed normal as a child to me. I remember when I was about 7, my dad, for whatever reason, decided to stop drinking. And, he just kind of cold turkey detoxed himself. I remember him throwing up. I remember him sobering up, and he stayed sober for a while on his own. And so I stayed sober. So from like the age of 7 to 13, I had some dry time. I managed to accumulate 6 years sober. And, but it's a kind of home I grew up in. It ended up being the solution that I knew is to get drunk. And I voluntarily started using when I was 13. I had this girlfriend in 7th grade. I loved her as much as you can love another 7th grader. I mean, man, she was my absolute best friend on this whole planet. And one morning I got a phone call from another classmate's mom. And it was that my girlfriend had been brutally raped and murdered by this guy in her neighborhood. And I just remembered thinking like, man, what the hell? Like, how does that even happen? I was devastated. I mean, I'm in 7th grade. Like, that's some brutal shit to go through. And I thought, I don't know what the point of life even is if that can happen to somebody, you know, so awesome. This girl was just like amazing. She was so smart and just like the sweetest person, everyone's best friend. And it was just a very short time after that I started to smoke weed. And I remember I had a coworker, you know, I work in recovery. I had a coworker and I was like, have you ever used drugs before? And she was like, not really. I smoked weed one time and it made me feel like I was in a whole nother dimension and I never wanted to feel like that again. And I said, that's crazy, because the first time I ever smoked weed, I felt like I was in a whole nother dimension too. And I never wanted to not feel like that again. Like, I don't like, yes, I endured some childhood trauma, but the first time I smoked weed, it wasn't like, oh, this made all the trauma go away. It was just like, I found the missing puzzle piece that I've always been looking for with that first time smoking weed. And it was my goal every single day. I wanted to smoke weed when I woke up, when I at school, when I got home from school. Like, that's all I wanted to do at 13 years old. And, you know, I had a head full of DARE class knowledge around that point. I don't know. I don't know if that's a regional thing. Does everyone do DARE? Not anyone nodding their head? Yeah, I see some heads nodding. Okay, cool. So, I had a head full of DARE class knowledge, and one of my friends that lived up the street was like, he said, listen, Tim, man, I'm worried about you. I think you're becoming a drug addict. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, I think you need to quit smoking weed. And I remember telling him, like, dude, my mind goes like 100 miles an hour all the time, and this is the only thing that ever slows it down. And he's like, well, I'm worried about you. And that made me a little worried about me too. And so that night I rode my bike to this creek by my house and I took my bag of weed and I threw it off the bridge. And I was like, all right, that's over with. And the next morning I was down at that bridge, underneath the bridge, looking for my bag of weed. And I feel like that's almost like a metaphor for like the rest of my using history. That I was always like about to stop. This is always about to be the last day. I'm just about to quit. And it, you know, it just kept going. And it talks about how addiction is a progressive thing. It continues to get worse. And it definitely continued to get worse for me. Let's see here. Yeah, so I immediately embraced that culture of like smoking weed and drinking and partying and all that. I remembered all the other kids at school would call me a dirt head. I don't know if like anyone else was ever a dirt head. I still don't even know what that means, but it was what they called all the pot smokers at my school. So I was a dirt head, and it didn't take me long before I figured I could sell weed and smoke more of it and not have to pay anything. And I'd actually have more money too if I sold the weed and all that. So that almost started like another addiction with like fast, easy, illegal money. And that had an escalation too. I went through phases with all drugs though, man. I had like crack. I loved crack. The first time I smoked crack, it was like all I wanted to do was smoke more crack. I don't know if anyone relates to that with smoking crack or not, but I learned pretty quick, if I'm going to take a hit of crack, I might as well just throw my wallet off a bridge. It's all crack money at that point. So I got burned by that real quick. And then I went on like a little hippie acid phase. I'm talking, this is my teenage years still. I went on an acid phase where I wanted to trip every day and listen to psychedelic music and all that. And there was like a huge acid drought around this time that happened shortly after I got into it. And they actually wrote about it in the Rolling Stone. Like some main guy got busted. He made like 99% of the LSD. And so one day I was looking for some acid. My buddy said, well, I can't get you any acid, but I can get this stuff that's just like acid. It's called meth. And I was like, meth is like acid? Like, I had no idea. And so I tried the meth, and it turned out it was nothing like acid. But I still liked it, and I wanted to do more of it. And there was like this drug task force commercial back around that time, and it was like a little, like an old school kind of commercial jingle, and it said, I don't eat and I don't sleep, but I got the cleanest house on the street. Meth, ooh, meth. And I'm like, yeah, it's more like it is in the commercial than acid. So I went on this like wannabe tweaker phase of my life too, until I started getting these like really bad chest pains, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. So I kind of put the meth aside too. But I did learn the correlation between meth and acid, and that's if you stay up long enough, you really do start to hallucinate some shit, and it really looks real. Like, I mean, I have seen dogs running 70 miles an hour alongside of my car on the highway, and, you know, ninjas and DEA agents that aren't there. Not quite the same trip, but yeah, that's horrifying. So anyway, it wasn't too long before I graduated to my drug of choice. And I think that's just what we do is, some people take that first drink and that's all they ever need. You know, that's just ding, 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 winner. I don't need to try anything else. The alcohol did it just fine. Me, it was like I kept going on this search, and when I found opiates, it was like, this is what I've been looking for the whole time. And so I thought, you know, maybe I'm not going to get addicted to this stuff, but really what was the problem for me was access to it. And I finally met a guy who worked at a pharmaceutical manufacturing company, and it was like an unlimited supply. And that just took my addiction to a point where, man, it was crazy how much oxy I was using. And when that guy finally got busted, I have a horrible habit, and I had a lot of money because I was selling lots of this oxy. And it was, you know, I had tried heroin already, but I knew that I shouldn't do it because of all the stories you hear about it. It's funny, like the way that I tried it is, this guy's like, hey, you want to buy some heroin? And I'm like, dude, fuck no. Are you crazy? I don't want to do any heroin. And he's like, dude, it's the exact same shit from Pulp Fiction. And I'm like, well, I really love Pulp Fiction. So I decided to take him up on it. And he gave me just a tiny little bit. He was like, don't do all of it, you know? And I'm like, I'm used to Coke. It really was like Pulp Fiction where she thinks it's Coke. But I did it, and I loved it too much. And so I didn't do it for a long time until I had this horrible habit. And I thought, you know, it's not so scary. I've already done it. And I'm pretty much doing synthetic heroin anyway. So, you know, what difference does it make? Well, fast forward, you know, eventually I'm shooting this stuff up, and man, my life deteriorated so quickly. And I will say this, like, before that, I was selling lots of drugs, and I was kind of successful, kind of like keeping it together a little bit. Even though I got busted a few times. One time, I tried to be pretty safe with how I was selling. But one time there was a domestic disturbance at my house, and it was a friend who actually started the disturbance. Long story short, the cops showed up, and they came in, and they're like, do you have any information for us? You're going to go to jail. And I said, sure, I'll cooperate. I was just hoping that maybe they'd be like, okay, here's our business card. Call us in a few days, and, you know, we'll work through this. No, they sent in some just crazy looking dudes that were like ready to fuck me up, like right out the gate. They walk in, they're like, so you got some information? I'm like, well, just give me a couple days, I'll work with you. And they're like, not good enough. Turn off all the fucking lights in this place. I'm like, what? The cops that were there were like, all right, we're going to step out and get some fresh air. I'm like, wait, you guys have to protect me. I think these guys are about to break the law. And man, these guys laid into me. I'm handcuffed. The guy's like got me. He's got his hand balled up on my shirt, and he's like gouging me in the face with his finger. And he's like, "How much fucking weed do you get at a time, motherfucker?" And I was like, "I get like a quarter pound every 2 weeks." Now, mind you, that was a massive lie, but I was ready to admit to something because I was probably peeing my pants a little bit at this point, you know. He's like, "All right, now we're getting somewhere." And he body slammed me on the floor, and then they drugged me into my kitchen, and they just started tearing my house apart. And he goes in my kitchen, he finds all these baggies, like boxes of sandwich baggies, and he comes up to me handcuffed, and he's like, "Why you got all these baggies, fat ass? You like to eat a lot of sandwiches?" And I was like, I just couldn't help it. I was just like, yeah. This dude cocks back and just launches this box of sandwich baggies in my face. They start just going through all my DVDs. They're ripping out the containers. They're ripping out the paper. They're ripping out the disc and throwing it across the room. And finally, they get to this like row of DVDs, and they're pornographic movies. And the agent like takes it and puts it in my Xbox and starts watching it. So he picks it up and he's like, "What's this one? Little Black Clitty? Let's watch this." And he like puts it on the DVD player, and he's like watching it, and he's like, he has the most pissed off look on his face while he's watching it for like 5 minutes. And I'm just sitting there just like baffled, like I'm getting the shit beat out of me. This guy's watching a porn. And I'm like, and finally he looks at me, he's like, "Unbelievable. I can't even get my dick hard. Motherfuckers like you killed my little sister." And I'm like, "What? Dude, I've never killed anybody, bro. I'm just like selling weed." Anyway, they like take me to jail, and I'm just telling the story because like this is just what my life was like, you know, constantly in trouble with the cops, selling drugs, getting beat up by cops. I ended up getting out of this because they took $10,000 from me and said, "If you don't say anything, we won't say anything." And I'm like, you know, what are you gonna do? You know, I'll at least have felonies. I'll have to pay more than that in lawyer fines. So anyway, I'm hitting rock bottom, man. I'm completely, you know, destroying my life, and it's getting worse and worse and worse every day. I mean, my life was kind of on a downward trajectory, and then once I used a needle, it was just a straight up nosedive. And I had a Cadillac. It just slowly started breaking down. I always had expired tags. They would pull me out at gunpoint. And I just didn't even care. I would just still go on dope runs just like that. And yeah, I don't know, man. It just kept getting worse. And I'll say this. I remember it was like November of 2011. It started to get to a boiling point where I didn't know what to do. I had kicked dope on my own like 10 different times. And I would go back to it all the time. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, you would think I would just have learned my lesson by now, you know, that I shouldn't do this, you know. And I would just keep going back to it. And at the end, it was like whatever I had in me that caused me to just kick dope cold turkey by myself, that didn't exist in me anymore. Like I had no off switch. I had no brakes. I had no, I did not have that stamina to even give it a try. The last time I had kicked dope on my own, it was methadone. And I didn't realize that methadone withdrawals were worse. I just thought that's where I was at in my addiction. It took about 30 days of just being as dope sick as I've ever been. And when I started getting high, I'm like, if I ever get high again, I've lost my fucking mind. And there you go. I'm getting high again. And I'm like, all right, right here now, I'm making a decision. I am never, ever going to even attempt to stop using heroin. I will fucking rob banks. I will kill people if I have to. Like, I'm never going through that, what I just went through. This is just my life. And man, I just the AA book talks about getting to a point of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's where I was at in my life, man. It just kept getting worse, and it was so dark and lonely and isolated. I had no one left in my life. Like, I had no friends. All my family had cut me off, except my grandma and my brother, and they both kept me at arm's length. Like, hey, we're not going to keep anything valuable out. We're going to hide our shit. You know, we know we're getting robbed if we don't. And I'm not proud of that. It's not like I thought I was cool. I never took money from my grandma. I was like, dude, you're so cool. You know, you earned this from your grandma. It was, every day I would take her Discover card. My grandma had a colonoscopy, or she had colon cancer. She had to get a part of her colon removed. So every like 15 minutes, she'd go to the bathroom. Well, I'd wake up dope sick, wait for her to go to the bathroom, and then go to her pillow because her wallet was under the pillow. I would take her Discover card, and I would drive straight up to the grocery store, and I would buy like a Mountain Dew and get $100 cash back. And I would do this every single day. And every single time I'm like, dude, please stop. This is the only person that still loves you. Stop taking her money. And I would wrestle with that all the way down to get high and all the way back. And I'd just be like, man, you got to figure out a way to pay her back. You got to do that. Well, that went on every day. I mean, $100 a day, 10 days, you're in for $1,000. After a month, it's $3,000. So I'm $3,000 in, and I'm like, dude, you need to get her bill out of the mail and hide it while you figure out a plan. Well, then another like 20 days goes by. I'm in for $5,000, just $100 a day, getting cash back on my grandma's credit card. And one day she called me. She's like, Tim, what have you done with my credit card? And I panicked. I tried to make up a story real quick. And I said, well, you see, I got in some legal trouble and I had to pay this lawyer. And she's like, Tim, $100 a day at the grocery store? Like, what are you talking about? And that's when it, like, the whole thing started to fall apart. Like, I finally was like, I need to get honest, you know? At that point in my life, I would binge watch. I tried to stay numb as I could. I would sleep as many hours of the day as I could. I would watch as much TV as I possibly could, and I would just be as high as I could. And I would like binge watch TV. I would binge watch the TV show Locked Up for some reason, like that. I would just watch that for hours and hours. It's a like TV documentary about life in prison, and I would watch this show and I would just be so jealous of the inmates. I would just think like, man, if I was in prison, I could probably stop and stay sober. Like if I was locked down 23 hours a day, that'd probably be the only chance I had to ever stop using. And I would watch the show and try to figure out what would be the best prison to go to. And so I finally settled on this beautiful prison in the Alaskan mountains where like they had this cool library and like everyone got along. But like I couldn't figure out what crime I'd have to commit or how the fuck I would get to Alaska to commit it. And it's like, and then how long would I be locked in county waiting for my charges, you know? And I gave up on that plan. I finally came up with another idea to sell one of my kidneys on Craigslist. So I posted an ad on Craigslist, kidney for sale, $250,000. And they posted they removed the post. It's illegal. You're not allowed to sell your kidney on Craigslist. So then I posted another Craigslist ad. It said kidney for donation if you donate me $250,000. And I did a little research. They removed that post. I did a little research. It turns out you can't even give off the appearance that you're trying to sell your kidney. So I took to Facebook and I'm like, hey, does anyone know someone who needs to buy a kidney? And everyone's like, haha, Tim, you're so funny. But in my sick addict mind, I was like, dude, there's a rich guy out there. He's dying of kidney failure. I got two of these motherfuckers. He needs one. I only need one. Like, let's do this. Like, share, and comment. Let's make this go viral. But everyone just thought I was joking. And I'm like, now I get a reminder every year about the time I tried to sell my kidney on the internet, by the way. It like pops up on my memories on Facebook, which I never delete those embarrassing memories. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. You know, this reminds me of what it was like. Anyway, so yeah, I get the memory. So anyway, I wasn't defeated yet though. I was determined. I am going to sell one of my kidneys. I did a lot of research. I found a website called sellyourkidney.net. They were offering $125,000. I was like, well, fuck, that's only half of what I was trying to get. But I wasn't having any luck on Craigslist or Facebook, so let's give it a shot. Sellyourkidney.net, enter in all your personal information, your social security number, like date of birth, all this stuff. I'm like, whatever, you are not going to be able to get anything with my name. And I enter in all this personal information and I click submit and a banner pops up and it says, you dumbass, you can't sell your kidney on the internet. And I thought, who the fuck makes a website like that? And really the same thought is like, who is legitimately trying to sell their kidney on the internet? You know, man, I was defeated. I also posted an ad on Craigslist to prostitute myself. And I don't want to make light of that because working in recovery, I've worked with a lot of women who have done that. And there's a lot of trauma around that. But for me and my story, I posted an ad to prostitute myself and not one single person responded to it. So that's like also part of my rock bottom is I couldn't even, people said I offered it too cheap. And I should have tried to charge more. They probably thought something was wrong with me. But anyway, yeah, that was a even lower spot in my bottom. And so, man, I was trying everything. I remember it was November of 2011. I had 2 days clean and I was at an NA meeting and it was November 10th, 2011. And I was on the way home with this guy and I said, hey, man, I'm thinking about relapsing on purpose so that I can start over tomorrow and my sobriety date will be 11/11/11. And he was like, man, technically this isn't like NA supported, you know, ideas or anything, but I think that would be kind of cool if you did that. And so I did. And you can't just like pick and choose sobriety dates. Like they don't just come and you can't just grab them like that. You know, that's the whole point of like, addiction being a disease that I'm powerless over. Like I have to go, me personally, I have to go be put in a facility to hit the off switch. But man, I was trying everything. Like I wanted to stop so bad. I don't know if any of you can relate to using against your own will, but it was like, I wanted to stop with everything in me and just could not. I was defeated. And, I even tried going to church. I went to this church. I'm super dope sick, but man, I'm just hoping for some kind of miracle. And why wouldn't I just lie? I don't know. I don't remember what I just said. Oh, about my sobriety date. Anyway, I went to church and I was hoping for I don't know, man. I was just grabbing at whatever I could. And I was super dope sick. And at the end, they do this like call to salvation. They're like, okay, if you want a relationship with Jesus, raise your hand. I'm like, man, I'll do anything. I put my hand up. And the guy said, all right, one person. And I'm like, oh, no, that's me. If it's one person, like I'm the one person. He's like, and so like my heart almost stopped. I was terrified. And then he's like, come up here, young man. And I'm like, what? No way. Like, I'm not doing that. Everyone's like clapping and cheering. Come up here. And the guy's like, he says, I mean, everyone's there. Everyone's standing up, clapping. The guy's got the microphone. He's like, what's your name? I said, Tim. He's like, all right, Phil, are you ready for a life-saving encounter with Jesus? And I said, well, I have a couple questions first. And he said, it's a yes or no. It's a yes or no question, Phil. And I said, all right, yes. He's like, all right, Phil, we're going to pray for you. And I still have this Bible that this guy gave me. It's like, dear Phil, good job on your decision to accept Christ in your life. But it's like, that's just, it was just crazy, you know, super sick. But it was shortly after that everything started to change. um, for the better, I guess. I remember it was New Year's Eve, 2011. The only person I hung out with was this crackhead guy, old crack smoker. We never had any no conversations, man. Our conversations were go left here, go right here, run in here. All right, return this. You know, he would steal stuff. I'd return it for gift cards. And I remember it's New Year's Eve, and it's just me and him, and we're not talking. I'm doing dope. He's smoking crack, and I'm watching the ball drop on TV. And man, all these people just look so happy. Like everyone's cheering. They're like kissing each other and hugging, and I'm there, and I just never felt more miserable in my life. Some recovery literature talks about, you know, when we're hitting bottom, we seek out lower company, like people worse than us. And that's who I thought he was. And the next day, he says to me, Tim, I can't hang out with you anymore, man. I'm like, why not? He's like, you're too fucked up, bro. I got to go. And he left. And I thought he was the lower company. It was like, no, in his eyes, I was the one who was worse off, you know? And it was like not too long after that it just all came to a screeching halt. Like I said before, my grandma caught me. I wrote her this long letter, and I admitted everything for the first time. I'm a heroin addict. I cannot stop using. I've tried. And so she connected me with some resources. Like she played bridge, and one of her friends was like a psychiatrist that told me about a state-funded treatment center. I didn't even know a state-funded treatment center was a thing. I thought the only way that someone like me could go to treatment was if the TV show Intervention showed up at their house and, like, you know, flew them out to one of these fancy places in California. I had no idea that state funded was a thing. And so she got me connected with that. And I'll tell you what, I went in once in early 2011. I got kicked out after 9 days. I snuck in a phone. I called and had some weed delivered to the place. I thought, you know, I'm a heroin addict. Weed's not my issue. But apparently they didn't agree. California sober wasn't a thing yet at that point, but apparently they didn't appreciate the Cali methods of recovery, and they kicked me out. And you know, it got a lot worse. And so when I went back the next time, I was prepared to take it a little more seriously. And I cannot thank my grandma enough for just being there and loving me, even though it cost her a lot. And I got into that program for the second time, and I was at a point where I wanted to try. I wanted to try something different. And I would ask all the people in there, because after about 2 weeks in any state-funded program, you've heard everything they have to say. And I was asking the people in there, like, man, how many times have you been to treatment? And guys would say, well, 10 times, 20 times, like crazy amounts of times. I'm like, what's happening? Like, why isn't this working for you? And I'm not kidding you. They would all say the same thing, damn near. Well, I didn't go to the meetings they told me to go to. I didn't get a sponsor. I didn't work the 12 steps. And I thought, man, like, how many times do you have to go? Like, why would you even come back here? Like, you know what they're going to tell you, and you just don't do it. You know, at what point do you just see if it works or doesn't? And so I thought, all right, I'm going to do these steps. I am going to get the sponsor. I'm going to work these 12 steps. I am going to listen to everything this guy has to say. I have literally nothing to lose by doing it. You know, I'm already fucking miserable. I have nowhere to live, you know, and I'll say this, you know, my sobriety date's March 12th, 2012. That day I woke up in this state-funded treatment center, and I mean, my teeth are rotting out of my head. I only have one pair of shoes. There's a hole in them. I have 12 warrants out for my arrest. My arms are bruised up, beat up. All my veins are collapsed. I have abscesses everywhere. I just want to die, honestly. And I'm just like, all right, I have nothing to lose if I just hear what these people have to say. And it was like there was two parts to that. One part is, what if this works? What if what they're telling me works here? The other part is, I have no faith in myself. And like, if I come back here again, I want to be able to look these people square in the eyes and be like, listen, I did every fucking thing this sponsor told me to do. I followed all his directions and I'm still back here. Stop telling these people this shit. It doesn't work, you know? And it's like, I give following those directions all the credit, man. That I'm sitting here with 9 years of sobriety. And, I thought maybe it would take about 20 years for my life to, like, maybe I'd have like some kind of union job and maybe I would start to be able to pay my own bills. Probably 20 years I thought it would take. And it was about a year and a half. I got hired at that program as a peer specialist. And my job was like helping heroin addicts to engage with treatment while they're waiting for a state-funded treatment bed. Like, that was my first job working in recovery. It was like working with people with my exact same situation that I was in. And that was a direct result of following those directions, getting that sponsor, working, making amends to people I'd harmed. My hardest amends, I don't know how steps you get in your Dopey Zoom, but I'll just say this, like, amends is everything for me. Hearing people's amends story made me even want to work the steps, like, more than anything. Like, I'll really take this seriously. It's step 9, made direct amends. So the hardest amends was probably to my grandma. And I said, Grandma, I've caused you a lot of harm. I want to make things right between us. And she said, that's nice, dear. Take me to Aldi's. And I said, Grandma, I don't think you understand. Like, I've caused you a lot of harm. I want to make things right between us. And she said, I know, dear, but I need lettuce. And I thought, man, she must have, like, lost her mind. Like, maybe she's, like, got dementia and she's, like, forgotten what I did to her, And I want to point out, though, the word amends doesn't mean sorry. The word amends means change. So I have to change. I owe my grandma a change. And all my grandma ever wanted was my time. And so I decided to give her my time. And I'll be honest, like, yes, I owed her money too. But my sponsor told me that when I'm making financial amends, I better be ready to pay. So I made financial amends to my mom. I said, Mom, I've done a lot of things to hurt you. I want to make things right between us. She said, $1,700. And I'm like, what about, is there any, like, emotional stuff you want to talk about? She's like, no, you owe me $1,700. That's all I'm worried about. And I'm like, fuck. So I had to set up a payment plan. My sister was the exact same story. I'm like, hey, Tira, I've done a lot of things that cause you harm. I want to make things right. She's like, $1,500. And I'm like, okay, what about, like, any emotional stuff? I was hoping to have one of these stories where I'm like, so then I made amends to my mom and she's like, listen, all I care about is that you're sober. You don't owe me anything. I was like, nope, not this time. I got to set up payment plans. I'm tapped out. My sponsor also said, they don't want your money. They want their money. And you just so happen to be the one who has it. So I have to set up those payment plans. But anyway, back to my grandma. I started to carry out what amends I could, which I just decided I was going to spend time with her at least once a week, every week, no matter what. And we would do whatever she wanted to do. And I wasn't allowed to accept anything from her. And I'm not kidding you. This went on for a year. And I walked into her house after a year of doing this. I walked in and she wheeled up to me with her walker. And she just said to me, Tim, I just want you to know that some people are really bad people and they do really bad things. And I want you to know that because of you, I know that they can change and become good people again. And I want you to know that I forgive you for everything you ever did to me. And, like, man, I cried. That was something I would not have gotten without my recovery. And I'm almost ashamed to say that it took me about 4 years to realize that when I first made my amends, I had said something like that to her before, like, Grandma, I'm going to be a good boy. I want to make things right. I want to do right. And she's like, so when I went to make my amends, it was like, I've heard this story before, and then you go right back to doing all the stuff you were doing. But I tell people this, man, if people doubt you, especially in early recovery, like, give them permission to doubt you. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so I can't fault people for expecting me to act like my past, but I have I have to make it where I have a better past behind me more recently, to where there just comes a point when they can't deny that a change has taken place in you. And so it took my grandma about a year, but she forgave me. She realized that a change had taken place and I wasn't the same person anymore. My dad, he came, he started to believe me a little bit after that, like that something really had changed. My dad would call me all the time and say, I know you're still fucking doing dope. You might have all them fooled, but you don't have me fooled. And I'm like, you know, Dad, I can understand why you'd say that. That's what I've done for a long time. And hopefully someday you believe me when I tell you that I'm sober. And like I was a counselor in a treatment center at that point when he'd be calling me. And then one day he called me up and he said, and he's wasted, like straight alcoholic. And he's like, I just want you to know that I used to tell all my friends that you were a piece of shit heroin junkie. And now I tell them I'm proud of you and that you're a heroin counselor. I'm like, yeah, that's not an actual job position, but like, I'll take it. Like I can only remember one other time in my life where my dad told me he was proud of me besides that. So anyway, just working steps, man. Life has been good. I lived in a sober living for 7 months. I got out of there. You know, I lived with other buddies from sober living, slowly worked my way up. I'll tell you, one of the most important things I think in recovery is just being teachable. And that's one of my like red flags. Am I being teachable? And one day I felt particularly unteachable. And I called my sponsor and I said, hey man, I think I got it all figured out. And he said, right on, man, do you have car insurance? And I'm like, well, no. And he's like, well, I don't know who the guy who has it all figured out is, but I'm pretty sure he has car insurance. And he hung up on me. But that was early recovery. But he had a point. You know, there's always something that I can be working on, and there's always room to need guidance in my life. So, yeah, man. And I'll tell you what, just because you're sober doesn't mean like life is all rainbows and orgasms, you know? Life fucking hurts. Life still shows up. And when you get sober, you surrender, and life's terms are the terms of your surrender. You don't get to negotiate the terms of your surrender. And, you know, I'll say this, like on one of the best days of my recovery, I remember laying there in bed with my girlfriend, listening to Frank Sinatra, thinking, man, my life is a fairy tale. Recovery is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And then my phone started ringing. It was my sister. And she's like, Timmy, you need to come to the hospital right now. And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, Ryan was in an accident. That's my brother. And I was like, is he okay? And she's like, it's pretty much the worst thing you could imagine. You just need to get here. And I thought, worst thing I could imagine means my brother died. There's no fucking way my brother's dead. That's not part of my story. And he's younger. He's a year younger than me. He's my absolute best friend in this world. And I drive to the hospital as fast as I can. I'm like, dude, there's no way my brother died. That's not happening to me. He probably broke his legs. I'll fucking wheel him around in a wheelchair. I'll help him do all everything he needs to recover. My brother's not dead. That's not, no. And I was wrestling with that thought, and I walked in the doors of the emergency room, and there was a priest standing there. And I'm like, oh my God, please. I like had this feeling he was there for me, but I tried to sneak past him, and he stopped me. He said, are you Tim? And my heart just dropped. I'm like, my brother is gone. He led me back to my sister, and she was already crying, and she told me. And I'll tell you what, going through that and staying sober through that is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, period. That I just can't even begin to explain to you how bad that hurt. But because I put my recovery first in my life, like I had people from all over the country show up for me when that happened. And I was able to stay sober through that. And I'll tell you what, I skipped making my amends to my brother because I was tapped out from my sister and my mom. So I was like, I owe him like $120. I'll get him back. We'll work it out. We'll be fine. And he died before I got to do that and tell him all the other stuff I wanted to tell him. But I can't have such a big ego that I can't hear the solution from anybody, you know. And I was back at work. I'm counseling a heroin addict. He's like actively high. and he's like counseling me more than I'm counseling him. I'm like crying, and this guy's sitting in my office, dope, like high as shit. And I'm like, I never made my amends to my brother. And he was like, that's bullshit, man. You can still make your amends, I swear. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, bro, you'll hear like the right song come on. You'll know exactly what to do. Trust me. And I was like, okay, you know, but just to be sure, I ran it by somebody else. And they're like, yeah, no, that's a thing. That's a thing. Do that. And I was sitting at my desk at work, and all of a sudden, I was listening to my headphones, and all of a sudden the song We Are Young by Fun came on. And I just started bawling, man. My very first day sober, my brother, I found out I had Hep C that day. My brother came up with a care package, and we just hugged, man. And in my family, we don't have moments like that where we just hug and cry and get real. You know, my brother was like, I just keep hearing this song, We Are Young by Fun. And I just keep thinking about when we were younger, I didn't have to worry about losing you. And we just cried and hugged. And that song came on while I was sitting at my desk, and I instantly knew where to go in my head. It was that moment where I'm hugging my brother on my first day sober. And I went to that moment. I was like, I'm so sorry I didn't let you know every day that you were my best friend and how much I loved you. I'm so sorry that I ever made you feel like you were anything less than my best friend. And I just felt him forgive me in that moment, man. And that was how I made my amends to my brother. And I don't want to make it sound like everything's all bad in recovery or that's like so traumatizing, but real shit happens, man. And it's unrealistic to think that we'll just go off and live this fairy tale forever. I've had a lot of cool shit happen too. You know, one day a guy called me, he's like, take me to a meeting. I'm like, fuck no, I ain't going nowhere. And he's like, please, man, please, you don't have anything better to do. Just take me to a meeting. And I decided to go. And I met my wife there in the program. And I'm just going to be honest, man. It was not too long after my brother died. I had some sick tendencies. I saw her. She looked really good. I thought, okay, this girl's probably on drug court. She probably ain't going to take this seriously anyway. I'll invite her out to coffee. I'm not even going to count as a 13th step because, you know, she didn't want to be sober. I had the whole situation mapped out in my head. And I went up and introduced myself, and she told me she had just moved here from Florida, that she had over a year sober. She had worked the steps. She had sponsored people. I'm like, holy shit, we got an actual candidate here, you know, and went out to coffee. And, you know, I met my wife in the program. We've been together for almost 6 years now. We've had 2 kids together, and we actually have another kid due in September. We were able to get married recently. Dude, life, and I'll say this, like losing my brother in recovery, man, I would give anything to have my brother back, but I'd be lying to you if I said that working through that and staying sober through that wasn't one of the best things that ever happened to me. Like what that did to build me up as a person, like don't get me wrong, it still hurts. And as a dope fiend, I have a hard time experiencing feelings. I actually have a playlist on my phone called Stored Grief, and it's just songs that make me cry about my brother when I feel like I've waited too long since the last time. Yeah, man, I've had a lot of good stuff, and I would say that being a dad's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. And so nowadays, you know, I'm sitting out in front of this community center. I started a community center in my area for people that don't have anything, that are looking for treatment. We give them Narcan, and we have meetings, all different kinds of meetings, not just AA. We just help people, man. We help guide them in the right direction. I get to work at a treatment center. It's the best thing. It's just an awesome career path. I get to do what I love for work. And I started a meme page, you know, Dank Recovery. I did that about 5 years ago, and it's just crazy to see how that's blown up. Like I was looking at my story that I just posted, and like who looked at it, and it said Chris Rock had looked at my story. And like, I don't know, man, I see that and I'm just like, what a fucking trip that that I would look at this and see Chris Rock is looking at some content that I put out. Like what, how, I go from this guy sitting in a treatment center bed to just having nothing to having a good life where, you know, I get to interact with some celebrities and stuff. I got to be on the Dopey podcast. I didn't even know what Dopey was, and found out it was like this whole gigantic movement, you know, and go present at DopeyCon. That's been awesome, man. And so anyway, if you're listening to this and, you know, I hope I didn't go on too many war stories or make anyone feel too triggered. I hate when that happens, but some of these stories, I laugh about them now, but I was crying when they were happening. I promise you that. And it's not like I'm proud of it, but I feel like the best thing we can do is just share our stories honestly, what we've been through. And I always like to put a humorous spin on it. Yes, this is dopey. I'm aware, but also like, I don't know. It just is what it is. So if you're new in recovery, man, just the best thing I can say is just be teachable. Just be teachable. I love you guys. Thanks for asking me to speak. That's all I got.
Take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, well I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky and watch those aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive to show all of these people what it means to be alive. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire is all I ever had. And my shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and I know where I stand. My shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and I know where I stand. Wonder would they pay me any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it climbs. 'Cause peace and love are very bad, they're hard to find. I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. I wanna be so bad. I wanna